Hello everyone. We have the most important development, that is the union budget. From the preliminary and mains point of view, it is very important that you would understand what actually is the budget, the basic concepts related to budget, otherwise you can't understand. And there are also possibilities that some basic concepts related to budget could also be asked in the preliminary examination. For example, if you see about 20 odd questions, 18 to 20 odd questions in the economy, in the preliminary examination, generally 2-3 questions are related to the basic concepts. In fact, if you see last year's paper, there were also questions on stock market related issues, SEBI and all that. Right? So questions in the economy are becoming very dynamic, and also without understanding the basic concepts, there is no point in trying to by heart what are the budgetary provisions and others. So before we analyze the budget for the year 2026-27, though it is generally called Union Budget 26, it is actually for the upcoming financial year, that is 26-27, April 1st, 2026 to March 31st, 2027 is the financial year. And as most of you would know, generally FY27 would mean the year ending with March 2027, right? We are in FY26, which will be ending in March 31st this year. Some basic points. Earlier, budget was presented sometime in the February last week, before the beginning of March. But in the recent years, they are presenting regularly on February 1st. And friends, this is the first budget which was presented on Sunday. Generally, they have never done it. There are some interesting aspects about this. Is the ninth consecutive budget presented by Finance Minister, Union Finance Minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. That itself is an important aspect which you should know. And one important aspect is also that we have the new Kartavya Bhavan, right? That is the new complex of Parliament. So, in the new Kartavya Bhavan, this is the first budget that was presented. These are some of the interesting aspects about the budget for you people. You should say these are like some interesting information, which is not actually the budget component, but you can say some bits associated, some interesting aspects associated with that. Okay, and in fact, the focus of this current year's budget is on Kartavya, what we should do, right? And in fact, it is centered around three Kartavyas for Indian economy, the road ahead for Indian economy, the three Kartavyas, and according to Finance Minister, the budget proposals, we generally call as budget proposals, automatically it will be accepted because it is done by the new majority government. So there is no question of budget not being accepted, but when it is presented, it is generally called budget proposal. Now the first kartavya, the first important aspect of the budget is to accelerate and sustain economic growth. Economic survey, we'll also have a discussion on the survey as we cover all the topics, because economic survey is the fundamental basis for our data on the new schemes, new proposals, whatever the government is doing. The data related to three important sectorial engines of Indian economy, say agriculture, industry and services. That also very, very important to be understood. So we will come back to survey. In fact, every topic we discuss, every sector we discuss, every scheme we discuss we need to top it up with the latest data in survey. So this economic survey would help you to understand the important aspects of your preliminary and mains questions for the preliminary as well as mains, because we will have a new economic survey next year. So budget and economic survey are important ingredients of your preparation for your economy part. Also understanding the prelims and mains concepts and all that. Anyway, so friends, I was talking about the kartavyas, the main task for Indian economy according to the budget. There are three kartavyas. The three kartavyas are actually to accelerate and sustain economic growth, and this will be done by enhancing productivity and competitiveness. There is also an important concept of resilience. Global economy today is quite volatile. We see a lot of geopolitical disturbances. Our Superman or super comedy man, Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, every day you will get a new idea. Long back, there was a Tata advertisement, I remember. Tata idea advertisement. Okay, phone, I think it is mobile service advertisement. That every day is a new idea. Like this Trump will get every day a new idea, and that would trouble most part of the world. So, in this context of geopolitical uncertainties, in the context of geopolitical disturbances and challenges, tariffs, right? We have been facing a lot of tariffs. Of course, yesterday night, a new trade deal was announced between India and US, where the tariffs which were earlier penal tariffs, where they also, started penalizing India for importing Russian oil, they have been brought down to 18%. That's a very important news today, right? I think you will be seeing it in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll also have a session on recent two important trade deals, that is EU India trade agreement and US India trade agreement separately. But then the first kartavya is to build resilience in the context of global dynamics. We need to withstand the global shocks. We need to sustain the growth as projected in the economic survey, say 6.8% to 7.2% GDP growth. We have already discussed what was GDP earlier, right? So resilience, one is to accelerate, the second one is to sustain, the third one is to resilient economy. This is first kartavya for Indian economy. So these are like three pillars of the approach for budget 2026-27. And friends, the second kartavya is capacity building of the people, aspirations of the people. Right? This is also very, very important. We need to empower them. We need to build their abilities and capacity so that they will be partners in the path to prosperity. In other words, we were actually talking about economic development some time back, growth and development. If the fruits of GDP growth are being distributed to all the people, that is what we call as economic development. So the second kartavya is capacity building of the people so that they would take active part in India's road to prosperity. There is no point in having an uneven, growth patterns. That is the second kartavya, that is capacity building. And friends, the third kartavya is सबका साथ और सबका विकास. That means we should be inclusive and we should be taking along everyone in the development. Of course, we have something called Viksit Bharat 2047, that is 100 years. So this is that every family community, religion and sector would have access to resources. See, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is the motto of the third Kartavya. So whatever the budget announcements were there, they were actually centered around these three pillars, three Kartavyas. One, to accelerate, sustain economic growth with a kind of resilience in the global economic context. Second, capacity building for people to fulfill their aspirations so that they will be partners in the growth, they will be benefited in the growth. Third Kartavya is Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, that it should be an inclusive growth, inclusive process. So these are the three important Kartavyas. But let me just give you a very brief idea on what are the basic concepts that are involved in a budget, union budget or government budgeting. In fact, government budgeting is one important chapter for your mains also, prelims and mains. See, economy should be read in prelims cum mains mode. There are few subjects, history for example, polity and international relations, and economy. These are the subjects where you can actually do a PCM kind of preparation, and the objective of our classes are also the PCM mode. So basically, you need to understand that some basic concepts, essential concepts in budgeting. So when we say union budget, now what is budget? Simply a statement of income and expenditure. ఇప్పుడు మనం కూడా బడ్జెట్స్ పెట్టుకుంటాం. You know how much you get, how much you spend, how much salary you get, how much household expenditure you have. It is like that kind of basic statement of income and expenditure. However, in the government budgeting, there are three components. First of all, what do you mean by budget? First component is a proposal for upcoming financial year, okay, that is 26-27. What are we going to spend? What are the proposals? Income and expenditure, revenue and expenditure. The second one is the revised estimates of this year. What do you mean by revised estimates of this year? We are in February now. This is FY26, the budget is for FY27. So the first component is proposals for the next year, upcoming budget. The second part is revised estimates. For example, we want to spend 10,000 crore on rural development. Proposal kada idi. But we are either spending 8,000 or 9,000, or we may be spending more. So revised estimates. Proposal veru, తర్వాత దాన్ని ఏమైనా రివైజ్ చేశారా అనేటటువంటి రివైజ్ ఎస్టిమేట్స్. థర్డ్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ ద బడ్జెట్ ఈజ్ దట్ ఇట్ ఆల్సో కవర్స్ ద యాక్చువల్స్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ ఫిజికల్ కరెంట్ ఫిజికల్, దట్ ఈస్ 26. సో బడ్జెట్లో త్రీ పార్ట్స్ ఉంటాయి. వన్ ఈజ్ ఫర్ ద నెక్స్ట్ ఇయర్, రిమైనింగ్ టూ పార్ట్స్ ఆర్ ఫర్ ద ఆన్గోయింగ్ కరెంట్ ఇయర్, విచ్ we are almost at the end of that. There are certain other concepts like what we need to understand, what are the different parts of the budget, government budget. There are two types. We will be sharing this with you all later. I hope you are able to see, right? So one is, first of all, this is government budget. We have two important components here. One is called revenue budget. The second one is called capital budget. Okay, so a government budget, union budget also, when you might have heard the speech, some of you, there are two important components. Just let me give you a recap. We just started with the introduction to budget and kartavyas, the main focus. Then we are taking a detour to what are the basic concepts. Then we will come back to actual components of the budget. Okay. Because when we discuss revenue budget, capital budget, you need to understand what it is. So budget is two types. One is revenue budget, the second one is capital budget. Now what do you mean by budget? In ochedi poyedi, right? income and expenditure. So again, in revenue budget, we have revenue receipts. Okay, we have revenue receipts and expenditure. As I said, budget is a statement of income and expenditure. In the revenue budget, we have revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. వచ్చే ఆదాయం ఏమిటి, పోయేది ఏమిటి. Now in the revenue receipts, what are the revenue that government is getting? Receipt అంటే ఏమిటి? You have to get it, right? Now here, tax revenue, direct tax, that is income tax, whatever we are paying, almost 6 crore people are paying income tax in nearly 147 crore of Indian population. Okay, salaried people, we have no escape, right? So we don't want to escape also, we should be responsible individuals, but that's a different part. So one is tax. Tax revenue will come under revenue receipts. I told you, in the preliminary examination, they can ask you what are the concepts. They may give you like which of the following come under revenue receipts. That's why you need to understand this, conceptual and operational part of the budget. So revenue receipts are tax revenue. What is tax revenue? Direct tax, that is income tax. Then we have corporate tax, industries and others, businesses. GST, you all know, GST is indirect tax. Customs is an indirect tax. Then excise is also an indirect tax, right? So revenue receipts are tax, direct and indirect. Then non-tax revenue, interest, government might be investing somewhere, right? So whatever the interest, dividends, మీరు చదువుతూ ఉంటారు, BHEL gave a dividend of so much to government. Public sector enterprises, NTPC gives dividend, NMDC gives dividend, because it is government owned, public sector. So the dividends, all that will also be revenue receipts, fees, whatever it was collecting, and grants, all this. So budget two types, revenue budget, capital budget. In the revenue budget, we have revenue receipts, we have revenue expenditure. I told you what is revenue receipts and revenue ఆదాయం ఏమిటి అనేది. Now let us see revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure takes a substantial part of the government income. Now what are revenue expenditure? Salaries. Government has to pay salaries, right? Salaries and pensions, this is a substantial part. Then subsidies. We were discussing subsidies some time back. What are the subsidies? We have different subsidies, right? So subsidies, whatever is even including, say for example LPG subsidy. Now you buy, some of us buy an LPG cylinder, people may get some 400 rupees or whatever subsidy to your account. That's an expenditure, right? That comes under revenue expenditure. Interest payment, government borrows, government bonds and all others it sells. So whatever interest it is paying, that will also be revenue expenditure. Grants to the states. For example, let us take Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh is building a new capital, a greenfield capital. If the central government is giving some grant, okay, then it will come under revenue expenditure. In this budget they announced around 11,000 crore or whatever, but they said we will provide this through multilateral agencies. Loan ga ippistamo, guarantee pettanar, vallu ivatలేదు. So assume that it is giving. It is this grants to states and union territories will also come under revenue expenditure. So budget to two parts ఉంటాయి, and one is revenue budget. This is what I explained to you. Let's move on to the capital budget. Okay. Now capital receipts. Now what is capital budget? Capital budget is, precisely speaking, it is nothing but asset creation. If you are investing in asset creation, capex, that is capital budget. So here again, like revenue thing, we have two important aspects. One is capital receipts, the second one is capital expenditure. Now capital receipts అంటే ఏమిటి? మనకి మూలధనం రావడం, క్యాపిటల్ రావడం, రైట్? సో డెట్ క్రియేటింగ్ Government borrowings ఉన్నాయా? What is that? Loans and borrowings. Government bonds ఇవన్నీ ఉంటాయి. Government might take loan from IMF or whatever, multilateral agencies. So government borrowings. Then loan non-debt creating, అంటే అప్పు చేయకుండా ఏమైనా వచ్చేవా, మనం ఇచ్చిన లోన్స్ ఏమైనా మళ్ళీ వెనక్కి వస్తున్నాయా, వాళ్ళు ఏమైనా లోన్స్ ఇచ్చారనుకోండి, ఆర్ దే కమింగ్ బ్యాక్? ఓకే. సెకండ్లీ, divestment. Divestment is a topic which we'll have to see in due course. Sale of equity in the public sector enterprises is disinvestment or divestment. Okay. So privatization, right? For example, now we have, say, LIC. If they are going to divest 10% of LIC, they have already done. So privatization. Vizag Steel, there has been Visakhapatnam Rashtriya Ispat Nigam. There has been lot of discussion on Vizag Steel privatization. That comes under divestment. So capital budget lo capital receipts, capital expenditure untai. Then in capital receipts, debt, non-debt, appulu gaanivi. Then other part is, of course, budget and income and expenditure kabatti we have capital expenditure. Infrastructure. Say government is building some projects, infrastructure projects, airport or ports or even roads, right? Or whatever infrastructure that is money, capex, capital expenditure, capex ante, that is being spent is called the capital expenditure. Equity in PSUs, stake in public sector units, PSP, public sector banks lo unnai, for example, they are increasing the equity, then that will also come under this. Loans to states and union territories, loan repayment capital expenditure, ఎందుకంటే దానివల్ల మనకి అప్పు తగ్గుతుంది, ఇంట్రెస్ట్ తగ్గుతుంది. So it is seen as a capital expenditure. So friends, these are the major things you need to see in this. This is what I wrote here. One is revenue budget, revenue receipts, revenue expenditure, then capital budget, capital receipts, and capital expenditure. Okay. So I hope it's clear to all of you. Now let's just move on to certain other expenditure. I mean certain other aspects, like what are budget types? Going by the difference between income and expenditure, we have three important things here. One is, let us say, balanced budget, where the revenue receipts, receipts and expenditure, income and expenditure, receipts anedi vastayi anedi the technical term, but if receipts and expenditure is equal, we are having a balanced budget. Most of you might be, you are trying for job, right? Most of you might be getting home, getting money from the parents, or some of you may be working later. So let us say I am earning so and so money every month, but my expenditure is also equal. So that is balanced budget. So I am not spending anything more, anything less, just equal. So that is balanced budget. Then surplus budget, receipts are higher than the expenditure. Okay, if receipts or income is higher than the expenditure, very simple, ఇందులో పెద్ద రాకెట్ సైన్స్ ఏం లేదు. సర్ప్లస్ అంటే మిగులు, మనకు వచ్చే ఆదాయం ఖర్చు కన్నా ఎక్కువ ఉందనుకోండి. If you have higher income or receipts than expenditure, that is surplus. Now what is deficit? Automatically వచ్చేదానికన్నా deficit అంటే ఏమిటి? లోటు, right? We are spending more than what we are getting by loans or whatever, that is called deficit budget. Okay, so friends, I hope it is clear. Now deficit is a very important component for us. Okay, now what are the deficits? When you say deficit, lotu, This is a key concept for you, which you need to understand. So fundamentally, one is called but deficit budget and first of all, as I said, you know, uh, total expenditure minus total receipt, right? Total expenditure minus total receipt. That is called deficit. You know, అంటే ఏంటి ఖర్చులోంచి ఇన్కమ్ తీసేస్తే మిగిలిందే డెఫిసిట్. Right? Deficit is nothing but expenditure minus receipts. Expenditure minus receipts. Okay? So, for example, I am getting, say, the expenditure is 120 rupees. Just 120. We'll talk about what actual numbers later. This is expenditure. Now, receipts is 100 rupees. Now, what is deficit? 20 rupees. This is how deficit is calculated. There are different types of deficits which you should be understanding. First of all, revenue deficit. Okay? Revenue deficit. We had spoken about revenue budget also, right? What do you mean by revenue deficit? Revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. As simple as that. Revenue expenditure into ఏమిటో మీకు చెప్పా. Revenue receipts ఏమిటో కూడా మీకు చెప్పా. So revenue deficit is nothing but revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. Revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. Okay, this is revenue deficit. First, what is deficit? Load and ఏమిటి? తర్వాత revenue deficit. The next important is effective revenue deficit. You know, effective. Effective అంటే మామూలుగా ఒకటి ఉండొచ్చు. Actually, in practice లో how much is the deficit? This is revenue deficit minus grants for capital assets. Revenue deficit minus very important friends. Revenue deficit is one, effective revenue deficit is another one. Now what is effective అంటే actually in practice లో మాట. Revenue deficit say 100 rupees. Out of 100 rupees, grants for capital assets. ఓ పోర్ట్ కట్టడానికి మనం గ్రాంట్ ఇచ్చాం. ఓకే, దాని మీద ఇన్కమ్ వస్తుంది. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ వేస్ట్. సింపుల్గా చెప్పాలంటే శాలరీస్ ఇవ్వడం వల్ల గవర్నమెంట్ ఏమైనా డబ్బులు వస్తాయా? రావు కదా. ఎకానమీలో ఏంటంటే ఇన్కమ్ రావడం ఇంపార్టెంట్, ఎర్నింగ్ ఈజ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్. అఫ్ కోర్స్ వాళ్ళందరూ పని చేస్తారు, దట్స్ అ డిఫరెంట్ థింగ్. So, but if you are giving grants to capital assets, economic activity is generated and some income is also expected over a period of time by the operations. So, effective revenue deficit, you have to remember what is revenue deficit, what is effective revenue deficit. ఇవి స్టేట్మెంట్స్ లా కూడా ప్రిలిమ్స్ లో ఇవ్వచ్చు. రెవెన్యూ డెఫిసిట్ మైనస్ గ్రాంట్స్ ఫర్ క్యాపిటల్ అసెట్స్. సో దిస్ ఇస్ కాల్డ్ ఎఫెక్టివ్ రెవెన్యూ డెఫిసిట్. Now the most important is fiscal deficit. You keep hearing about how the budget says 4 right? You keep hearing about fiscal deficit very frequently. this is simple. Total expenditure minus, okay, right? Deficit కాబట్టి expenditure first వస్తుంది. Minus revenue receipts plus non-debt capital receipts. Minus revenue receipts plus non-debt. Fiscal deficit. What is fiscal deficit, friends? Fiscal deficit is total expenditure minus revenue receipts. Revenue receipts అంటే మీకు ఆల్రెడీ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేశారు. ప్లస్ నాన్ డెట్ క్యాపిటల్ రిసిప్ట్స్ అంటే మనకి ఏమైనా మనం పెట్టిన ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్ మీద వచ్చేటటువంటి డివిడెండ్స్ కానీ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ పేమెంట్స్ కానీ ఐ ఆల్రెడీ టోల్డ్ యూ దట్ వాట్ ఆర్ ద నాన్ డెట్ క్యాపిటల్ రిసిప్ట్స్ అనేటటువంటివి. సో దే ఆర్ ఇంపార్టెంట్. సో అవి కలపాలి. సో రెవెన్యూ రిసిప్ట్స్ గవర్నమెంట్కి వచ్చేటటువంటి ఆదాయం ప్లస్ మిగతా అంటే రెవెన్యూ రిసిప్ట్స్ ఏంటి, ట్యాక్స్ నాన్ ట్యాక్స్ ఇందాక చెప్పుకున్నా కదా, రైట్, లైక్ దట్. సో దిస్ ఈస్ ఫిజికల్ డెఫిసిట్ అండ్ యూ హ్యావ్ టు manage fiscal deficit very carefully. So that's a very very important aspect for you to remember. There is something called effective fiscal deficit again. Effective fiscal deficit. This is a rather relatively newer concept. అంటే ఈరోజు వచ్చింది కాదు కానీ few years onwards there is a relatively newer concept of effective fiscal deficit. Argument ఏంటంటే now they are spending money, expenditure higher. The government, whether it is central government or state governments, are now arguing that whatever we are investing capex అంటే క్యాపిటల్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్ని ఎక్స్పెండిచర్ కింద చూడకూడదు బికాస్ దే ఆర్ ఫర్ ద ఫ్యూచర్ రెవెన్యూ జనరేషన్. సో యూ రిమూవ్ ఇట్. ఐ విల్ ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ దిస్. ఇప్పుడు సే ఫిజికల్ డెఫిసిట్ టోటల్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్, ఓకే, టోటల్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్ ఈ రెండు కలిపి సే లెట్ us say we have 100 rupees, rather let us say 150 rupees is total expenditure, okay, and 120 is the receipts, revenue receipts as well as the non-debt capital receipts. So 120. Technically what is the fiscal deficit? Here 20 rupees undu. 20 rupees is fiscal deficit, right? Now government says out of this expenditure of 150 rupees I am investing 30 in the capex, 30 rupees in the capex, right? So effective fiscal deficit ఎంత, ఇందులో మళ్ళీ 30 తీసేయాలి, right? So that is how we need to say. So in the calculation of fiscal deficit on paper, yes, there is a deficit, but actually we are investing on capex కాబట్టి తప్పదు కదా, ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్ చేస్తే ముందు ఫ్యూచర్లో డబ్బులు వస్తాయి. దాన్ని మనం వేస్ట్ ఫుల్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్ కాదు, అంటే నాన్ ఇన్కమ్ జనరేటింగ్ ఎక్స్పెండిచర్ కాదు. సో యూ హ్యావ్ టు రిమూవ్ ఇట్ అంటారు. సో ఎఫెక్టివ్ ఫిజికల్ డెఫిసిట్ ఈజ్, నౌ వాట్ ఈస్ ఎఫెక్టివ్ ఫిజికల్ డెఫిసిట్? యు నో, ఫిజికల్ డెఫిసిట్ minus expenditure on capex. Capex అంటే capital expenditure, expenditure on capex, and this is called the effective fiscal deficit. డెఫిసిట్లన్నీ బాగా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాలి మీరు. ఓకే, దెన్ ద నెక్స్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఆస్పెక్ట్ ఈస్ we have something called primary deficit. Okay, what do you mean by primary deficit? Okay, primary deficit is nothing but fiscal deficit minus interest payments. Fiscal deficit, whatever is that, fiscal deficit minus interest payments. Whatever government borrows, on that they have to pay interest, na? So interest payments. This is called primary deficit, and there is another concept which you generally tend to come across in RBI terminology and all that, monetary policy and others, that is actually monetized deficit. అంటే ద్రవ్యపరమైనటువంటి లోటు. మానిటైజ్డ్ అంటే క్యాష్ టర్మ్స్ లో చూస్తే ఎలా లోన్స్ తీసుకోవడం అని తీసిస్తే మానిటైజ్డ్ డెఫిసిట్ అంటారు దీన్ని. మానిటైజ్డ్ money, the moment you think about money you have to think about RBI, right? Monetized deficit, that is nothing but RBI borrowings, right, and cash drawings, whatever cash that is taken. RBI borrowings, right, minus cash drawdown. Okay, so these are different deficits that you need to understand. Ivanni very very important for you to understand. Okay, so this is one thing. So what did we do? We have understood what is the basic budget, government budgeting, what are the types, revenue budget, capital budget, what are the revenue receipts, what are revenue expenditure, what are the capital receipts, what is capital expenditure. Then we move on to budget types, that is surplus budget, so balanced budget, surplus budget, deficit budget. We are following deficit budget. There is also something called zero budgeting, which is nothing but the same. Then we also have different deficits which are very very important. You know, deficit is fine. Government should always spend a little more than what it earns. Otherwise, there will be no infrastructure creation. Maybe on some other occasion, after a point, I will also explain to you something called Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management (FRBM) Act, which prescribes certain kind of fiscal consolidation. I will explain it a bit later so that you will understand better, not now. Okay, so these are the different deficits, and there are some other terminologies which are related, but I think as we go on, these are the main things that you should know. There is, concept of zero budgeting. Zero budgeting was a concept which came up. The concept of zero budgeting came up from 1987. That means we will begin with as a zero, reviewing. Everything is a fresh start for budgeting accounting purposes. That is reviewed from zero, whatever expenditure and all that. So for అంటే without any lag effect అన్నమాట, దాని జీరో బడ్జెటింగ్ అంటారు. We have gender budgeting. The concept of gender budget is used for the first time from 2005-6. It is for a gender perspective for women and others. This is called gender budgeting. We have something called globally, if you see, we have something called performance budgeting. The performance budgeting is linked to what is the actual spending rate, growth rate, how much the money spent or the budget expenditure is able to generate some results like that. We have another concept like outcome budget, but I don't think you need to focus except zero budgeting and gender budgeting. sorry, except zero budgeting and gender budgeting. Others are not too important for you to understand this. So, friends, this is what we need to see for the basic concepts of budget, which you need to understand, right? So I hope it is clear. Once you understand, then it will be easy for you to follow and to track the actual allocations in the budget. Okay, so we have three kartavyas, which I already told you. So the next part of discussion for us will be what exactly is the budget proposals, and what kind of top key sectors or allocations have been made. Three kartavyas, we will go by some of the important aspects of the three kartavyas that they mentioned, right? So the three kartavyas, as I said, to just give you a recap, where the first kartavya is to accelerate and sustain, right, growth, economic growth, and this can be done by enhancing capacity, productivity, and competitiveness so that resilience can be built. This is what I said. We will share this with you, okay, after explanation. The second kartavya is to fulfill the people's aspirations, capacity building, so that they will be partners in India's growth story, prosperity. And third kartavya is sabke saath sabka vikas. So inclusive growth with everyone. It's not just to one thing. So friends, if you see the first kartavya is to accelerate economic growth and sustain it. How do you accelerate economic growth? How do you improve productivity? How do you improve competitiveness? By investing in manufacturing, by investing in certain key sectors. The most important investment they have done, announced, is something called Biopharma Shakti. Biopharma Shakti is nothing but enhancing the biopharma. We have two important aspects of biopharma. There are two components here. One is biologics, అంటే లివింగ్ ఆర్గానిజమ్స్ నుంచి చేసినటువంటి డ్రగ్స్, మందులు. డ్రగ్స్ అంటే ఆ డ్రగ్స్ కాదు, రైట్, హీలింగ్ డ్రగ్స్, మంచి మందులు. ఓకే, సో లివింగ్ ఆర్గానిజమ్స్ from the medicinal drugs which were made from living organisms like cells, bacteria, and all that, they are called biologicals. Okay, the other thing is biosimilars. Biosimilars are drugs which are similar to the properties of biologicals. ఒక biological drug ఉందనుకోండి, ఎవరో చేశారు, మనం will do the same thing with the similar attributes. That is called biosimilars. So biopharma Shakti, in the first kartavya, the most important announcement they made is creation of a new fund for building biopharma Shakti. The name, this is 10,000 crore. This 10,000 crore fund of 5 years, it will be for 5 years, and it will develop, the objective of this is to develop India as a global biopharma manufacturing hub. That is one thing. Then this we have some of you who are reading, you might be studying pharmacy or medicine and others. Otherwise also you will know, we have something called National Institutes of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, NIPER. We have 7 NIPERs across the country. One also is in the Hyderabad, right? NIPER, National Institutes of Pharmaceutical Education and Research. They are called NIPERs. So there are 7, and they will be upgraded. And as part of this BioShakti, 3 new NIPERs will also be set up, focusing on the biopharma capabilities. Okay, then clinical trials. Another important component of Bioshakti is clinical trials. They need to be established clinical trials which are accredited. Ante, I don't know how many of you are aware, for any drug that is developed, there is phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 trials. Last time ఏంటంటే హ్యూమన్ ట్రయల్స్ అంట. వాలంటీర్స్ని అడుగుతారు, కొత్త మందు డెవలప్ చేసాం, మీరు వచ్చి వేసుకు చూస్తారా అంటారు. డబ్బులు ఇస్తారనుకోండి. సమ్ పీపుల్ వాలంటీర్, వీటి సంతకం పెట్టించుకుంటారు, నువ్వు పోతే మాకు సంబంధం లేదు, అది వేరే విషయం, రైట్? బట్ దీస్ ఆర్ కాల్డ్ క్లినికల్ ట్రయల్స్. హౌ డు యూ ప్రూవ్ ద ఎఫికసీ ఆఫ్ ఎ డ్రగ్? The efficacy of a drug is proven through clinical trials. So, under Biopharma Shakti, they wanted to set up, a network of 1,000 accredited India clinical trial sites, institutions or organizations. So, friends, we have three important components of Biopharma Shakti. In the preliminary, they can ask you, which of the following statements are true with reference to Biopharma Shakti? Point number 1, a fund of 10,000 crore was earmarked for next 5 years to be spent on biopharma capabilities. B, the NIPERs, there will be 3 new NIPERs, National Institutes of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, will be set up with separate focus on biopharma. And 7 others will also be accredited. Third component, C, a network of 1,000 accredited clinical trial centers will also be developed. Okay, these 3 are the focus areas of Biopharma Shakti. Friends, how do we study budget? What kind of questions will come? This is how the questions are coming in the prelims. You have to be careful. Okay, and I also told you what is biologicals and biosimilars. You should remember. Biopharma ante evudo teliyali, telise kada gurtu pettukunadi, right? Then another important development for the building capability under first Kartavya is semiconductor mission. India Semiconductor Mission 2.0 will also be launched. Okay, this will produce equipment and materials, with full stack Indian IP. Semiconductor chips are very important for any of the information technology and other developments, right? As most of you are also engineers these days, you would also realize the importance of chips. Sometime back there is a global shortage of chips actually, so that led to some decline in computer sales before last year. So semiconductors chips become very, very important. So, budget also proposes under Kartavya first, Indian Semiconductor Mission 2.0. So, this will develop Indian IP. See, IP is intellectual property. IP is very, very important. Then third point, again on the manufacturing, it will be electronics component manufacturing. It is outlay increased to 40,000 crore. Now world is moving on electronics. As you might be aware, we are not so strong in electronics. We generally depend on China, Japan and other countries. So it is important that we need to develop this electronics component manufacturing. So they have put up this outlay to 40,000 crore. Okay, so in the manufacturing, first Kartavya is to accelerate and sustain growth. Accelerate ఎలా చేస్తాం? ఎక్కువ ప్రొడక్షన్ జరిగితే ఎక్కువ గ్రోత్ వస్తుంది, ఎక్కువ ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ వస్తుంది. దట్ ఈస్ వై దే వాంట్ టు డూ దిస్ బయోఫార్మా సెమీకండక్టర్ మిషన్, ఇండియా సెమీకండక్టర్ మిషన్ 2.0 and the electronics component manufacturing. That is third aspect. Then we need to manufacture rare earth materials which we are importing in a significant manner. So rare earth corridors will be established, so in the states of Odisha, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Very, very important to promote mining and also processing, research and manufacturing. So this is the fourth point. And the fifth point is dedicated chemical parks clustered for chemical manufacturing. Then capital goods capability. capital goods production capability will also be strengthened. A scheme for enhancement of construction and infrastructure equipment. ఇప్పుడు పెద్ద పెద్ద మెషిన్స్ అవన్నీ ఉంటాయి మన ఎర్త్ మూవర్స్ ఇవన్నీ దే ఆర్ ఆల్సో టు బి మ్యానుఫ్యాక్చర్డ్ అండ్ కంటైనర్ మ్యానుఫ్యాక్చరింగ్. So container manufacturing is very important for logistics, exports and all that. So the under bio under the first kartavya, these are the important things which are to be understood. Then there is also textile focus. Textile sector will also be developed. There are major textile parks to be set up. Mahatma Gandhi Gram Swaraj initiative will be launched to strengthen khadi, handloom and handicraft sector, because Gandhiji was always speaking about Gram Swaraj. Then legacy industries. Legacy industries means wherever we have strength, we have a legacy of developing industries, good growth, they will be encouraging them with a kind of 200 industrial clusters they will set up. Then creating SMEs, they wanted to create champion SMEs where they are growing much. So SME growth fund was 10,000 crore. So two growth funds are there, 10,000 crore for biopharma and 10,000 crore for SMEs. Then infrastructure growth, there is another fund that is to be announced as infrastructure risk guarantee fund, that will also be there to promote private sector. Then dedicated freight corridors for movement of goods. Then 20 new waterways, national waterways will also be developed, right? Then training institutes for waterways. ఇప్పుడు మనం అన్ని అసలు నీళ్ళు ఎక్కడ ఉన్నాయో కాలంలో ఇవన్నీ మర్చిపోయాం. ఎవరు కోస్టల్ ఏరియాస్లో, ఈవెన్ ఆంధ్ర ఆల్సో, when I remember when I was in school days, we used to travel to Narsapur. There is a canal from connecting Palapallu to Narsapur. I still remember seeing boats, ఎసగా అవన్నీ పెట్టుకుని బోట్స్ వెళ్తూ ఉండేవి, అంత నీళ్ళు ఉండేవి. But gradually now no waterways at all. So they will be developing this. Then cargo promotion scheme was also launched. Then we have seaplane VGF, viability gap funding, tourism promotion ki seaplanes అంటే ఎగిరి వాటర్లో కూడా వెళ్ళే seaplanes అంటారు వీటిని. సో దే ఆర్ డెవలపింగ్ ఏ VGF స్కీమ్. కృష్ణా వాటర్లో అక్కడ కూడా ఏపీలో seaplanes ఇంట్రడ్యూస్ చేయాలని దేర్ వాజ్ ఏ ప్లాన్. సో then energy security, right? Energy security. Then economic corridors, developing city economic regions, high speed corridors, trains, high speed bullet trains will be there. They have announced 7 bullet trains, high speed trains corridors, which you need to remember. One is from Mumbai to Pune, the second one is from Pune to Hyderabad, third one is from Hyderabad to Bangalore, fourth one is from Hyderabad to Chennai, fifth one is from Delhi to Varanasi, and the Chennai to Bangalore, then Varanasi to Siliguri. There are 7 high speed corridors: Mumbai to Pune, Pune to Hyderabad, Hyderabad to Bangalore, Hyderabad to Chennai, Chennai to Bangalore, Delhi to Varanasi, Varanasi to Siliguri. These are 7 high speed corridors, and friends, you will be surprised, the distance between Hyderabad and Bangalore will be covered in 2 hours. The distance between Hyderabad and Chennai will be covered in 3 hours. Bangalore flight 1 hour padutundi. Train, once they serve, it takes 2 hours. So this is also an important. So other reforms are also there, like including Viksit Bharat plan, banking reforms and others. But I suggest you read them for the day. Focus on concepts. Remaining things will be explained to you in due course in next discussion. And once we finish this, we will share you the documents also, PDF on this basic concepts and all that. Okay, so that's it. Any doubts? Do you have any doubts for today's discussion? Is this all right? Respond please. Okay? Okay then. Thank you.